students, I welcome you all. I hope you all good. Be safe in your home. Study daily and do your homework daily. Okay, with the help of God, we move on to today's lesson. Okay, children, just imagine you are playing with your friends. Somebody comes and asks you any address. You will say some reference points, right? You will say some reference points like it is near the lake, beside the building, behind the library. If we know that place, be able to tell some reference points to them. If it is a small place or a surrounding place, be able to tell that reference points to them. Imagine if it is a big earth. How will you tell those reference points to them? It seems to be an impossible, right? But it is possible. Those reference points are called as parallels and meridians. In today's class, we are going to see about parallels and meridians. What is the shape of the earth? We all know earth is spherical in shape. And earth does not stay in one place. It keeps on rotating from the direction west to east on its own axis. Usually a clock rotates in this direction, right? This is called the clockwise direction. But our earth, it rotates in anti-clockwise direction. That is opposite to the clockwise direction. It rotates in the direction to west to east on its own axis. What is an axis? An axis, it is an imaginary line drawn through the center of the earth. Axis, it is an imaginary line drawn through the center of the earth. Then the endpoints on the axis are called poles. For every line, if it is a real line or an imaginary line, it adds some endpoints, right? For every line, it adds an endpoints. Then that endpoints on the axis are called poles. We call it as poles. The endpoints on the axis are called as poles. Usually, Earth has two poles. They are North Pole and the South Pole. Earth has two poles, that is North Pole and the South Pole. These poles are used as two fixed points. There is no change in that points. Earth has only two poles, that is North Pole and the South Poles. There is no change in that. So these poles are used as two fixed points. A set of circle. A set of circle is drawn on the surface of the pole. We'll be able to see that, right? And line is drawn on the surface of that pole. These circles run from west to east. It is run based on the direction which the earth rotates, right? Earth rotates in west to east, so that these circles also run from west to east. A set of circles, these are called parallels. Okay, a set of circles is drawn on the surface of the pole. These circles run from west to east, and this is called parallels. The earth is divided into two equal parts. In the middle of the earth, we can able to see that a thick line is drawn on that surface, right? In the middle of the earth, a thick line is drawn on the surface, and it separates the earth as 2 points. That is two equal points. That is from the north side of an equator. That is north part of the equator is called northern hemisphere, and the south south part of the equator is called southern hemisphere. The upper part is the north part of the equator. It is called northern hemisphere, and the lower part, that is south side of the equator, is called as southern hemisphere. Important features of parallels. All parallels are complete circles. You all see that, right? A imaginary line drawn on the surface of the pole. These lines are called as parallels, and all parallels are complete circles except for the north and south poles, because as we saw, north and south poles are the end points, right? These are the okay, because northern pole and the southern pole are called two fixed points. Okay, so it is not a complete circle. All parallels are complete circle. These are called parallels. Okay, these imaginary lines are called parallels, and it is a complete circle. It ends except the north pole and the south pole, because it is the two fixed points and it cannot change. Then the length of the parallel decrease as we move away from the equator towards the poles. The length of the parallel decreases as we move away from the equator towards the pole. Away from the equator. From the equator, this is the first parallel line, and this is the second parallel line. From the towards the pole, the parallel line is decreases. Then all parallels are located at an equal distance from each other. All parallel lines are located at an equal distance from each other. From the equator to the first parallel line, it has some distance, right? Those distance are completely equal to the first parallel line and the second parallel line. Each parallel line has equal distance from each other, and the parallel lines neither touch nor cross one another. The example for parallel lines are railway tracks. Example for parallel lines are railway tracks. We all see that railway tracks are neither meet each other till some point. Okay, these are the example for parallel lines. Then you can ask a question that how parallels are numbered. How can we number? It is a first parallel line, then it is a second parallel line. How many numbers of parallel lines are there in the earth? Like that, you can also ask a question. The first, we start from the equator at mark as 0 degree. From the equator, we mark as 0 degree. Then the next parallel line is marked as 90 degree. Then if it is the next parallel line is marked as 90 degree. If it is north from the equator, it marked as 90 degree north. If it is north from the equator, it is marked as 90 degree north, and if it is marked as south from the equator, it is marked as 90 degree south. Likewise, there are 90 parallels in the northern hemisphere and the 90 parallels in the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere part, that is the upper north part of the equator is called as northern hemisphere. That the northern hemisphere has 90 parallels in that. Then the south part of the equator is called as southern part of the hemisphere, and the southern part of the hemisphere has 90 parallels. So totally 180 parallel lines. In that parallel, it also included the equator, because it is an imaginary line, right? It has divided the earth into two parts. So we have to calculate it. So then, therefore, there are 181 parallel lines are there. Then Other than the equator, North Pole, South Pole, there are four other important parallels are there. They are Arctic Circle, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, and the Antarctic Circle. These are the other important parallels except equator, North Pole and the South Pole. The Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle are called polar circles. Arctic Circle and Antarctic Circles are called polar circles. Okay, let us finish only parallels in this topic, then continue the meridians in the next lesson. Let us recall it from the first. Okay, from first, Earth, it is an spherical in shape. Then Earth does not stay in one place. It keeps rotating from west to east on its own axis. This is in clockwise direction, and the Earth rotates in anti-clockwise direction, that is opposite to clockwise direction. Okay. Axis. Axis, it is an imaginary line drawn through the center of the Earth. Then endpoints on the axis are called poles. For every line, even it is an imaginary line or real line, it has some endpoints. For every line, it has some endpoints. Then that endpoints on the axis are called poles. Okay. Then Earth has two poles. They are North Pole and the South Pole. They are North Pole and the South Pole. These poles are used as two fixed points. A set of circle is drawn here, right? Be able to see that a set of circle is drawn on the surface of the pole. These circles runs from west to east. Because the Earth rotates from west to east on its own axis. So these circles also run from west to east, and these imaginary lines are called as parallels. The Earth is divided into two equal parts. We all see that a thick line is drawn. It is also an imaginary line. A thick imaginary line is drawn in the center of the Earth. It divides the Earth into two equal parts. And the first part, the upper part, like the north part of the equator, is called as northern hemisphere, and the south part of the equator is called as southern hemisphere. Okay, the Earth is divided into two equal parts by drawing an imaginary line between the North Pole and the South Pole. This line is called equator. It is also an imaginary line. A thick imaginary line is drawn into the middle of the Earth. It divides the Earth into two equal parts. That is, the upper part, that is north part of the equator is called as northern hemisphere, and the south part of an equator is called as southern hemisphere. Then important features of parallels. All parallels are complete circles except for the north and south poles. All parallels means an imaginary line drawn on the surface of the Earth, right? We can see in the previous picture an imaginary line is drawn in the surface of the poles. It is called an parallels and parallel lines. All parallels are complete circles except for the north and south poles, because north and south poles are the two fixed points. So these are the two fixed points. Then the length of the parallel decreases as we move away from the equator and towards the pole. We can able to see that, right? It is This length, it is an first parallel line and it is an second parallel line, and as we saw, no, from northern hemisphere it has 90 parallel lines. 90 parallel lines. In that picture it is an first parallel line, and it moves towards, if it is moved towards the north pole, the length of the parallel lines is decreased. Okay, these are the important features. Then all parallels are located at an equal distance from each other. If from the equator to the first parallel line it has some distance, okay, that distance is maintained towards the end of the north pole or towards the end of the poles. Okay, if the equator and the first parallel lines have some distance, then it is maintained from the first parallel lines and the second parallel lines, and it is never changed. It has equal distance from each other. Then parallels neither touch nor cross one another because it has an equal distance from each other, so it does not touch or cross one another. The example for the parallels are railway tracks. Then there are 90 parallels in the northern hemisphere. That upper part, that is north part of the equator, is called northern hemisphere. It has 90 parallel lines. Same likewise, the south part of an equator, the southern hemisphere, has 90 parallel lines. So it has 180 parallel line. 180, that is 180 parallel lines. Equator is also an imaginary line, so we have to calculate that also. So including that equator, it has 181, that is 181 parallel lines are there. Then other than the equator, north pole, south pole, there are 4 important parallels. Those are Arctic Circle, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, and the Antarctic Circle. Arctic and Antarctic circles are called polar circles. Okay, let us move on to recapitulation questions. What is an axis? Axis is an imaginary line drawn through the center of the earth. Axis is an imaginary line drawn through the center of the earth. The endpoints on the axis are called poles. Then, what is an equator? Equator is an imaginary line that divides the earth into two equal parts. Equator is an imaginary line that draws on the surface of the poles, and it divides the earth into 2 equal parts, that is north pole and the south pole. What are the other 4 important parallel lines? They are Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, Arctic Circle, and the Antarctic Circle. Arctic and Antarctic circles are called as polar circles. Your homework is kindly study this parallels, and we see meridians in the next class. Then in this end of second lesson, that is parallels and meridians, I'll give a small test in GCR. So for downloading the GCR, go to classroom.google.com or download Google Classroom from the Play Store. Click join class, and this is the class code for the social science. L26FPXH. Kindly note out this. This is the class code for the social science only. Okay. If I gave any assignment to you, or if I gave any test to you, this is the class code. You have to submit your assignment in this classroom, this GCR. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, students.